Slayer has and always will be a consistent moneymaker, but is it still considered good? That's what we'll be covering in this video, so whenever you're ready, grab your cup of tea, sit back, relax, and enjoy. I'm going to grab 10 different Slayer tasks without the use of VIP tickets, which I still do have, but I won't be using them as I'll be clicking or choosing the task that doesn't require a VIP ticket. I will also be stopping myself from skipping any tasks I don't like or would usually skip. After we've done that, I'll get a little bit into the results and how you could increase the amount of money you make from Slayer. The first task we received was a dinosaurs task, and unsurprisingly I went straight to the venomous dinosaurs with melee. Now for those who don't know, Insight Fear is actually incredibly good here, and it is slightly better to be using magic at venomous dinosaurs as you can get more kills per hour, but I had a melee preset ready to go and I just decided, let's go ahead and just use that. It should be fine. Now, dinosaur bones did go up in value around the Powder of Burial's release, but they've been going back down now, but they're still more expensive than they were, let's say, 4 or 5 months ago. So, I was hoping the GP per hour would actually be pretty good. Now, as you can see, I made 2.1 million GP. However, the loot didn't actually sell for this. It sold for around 1930k, so let's say 1.9 mil. Now, that might seem like good money to some of you, and to be honest, for something AFK, it's not terrible. But this task did take me 16 minutes, so the GP per hour would only be around 7.2 mil. This could absolutely be better if we got the bone blowpipe, but we didn't, and considering that most players will be using a Scrimshaw Vampirism here, the GP hour does drop a lot. But with the Death Note relic, it's really nice to AFK these. Let's get another task. Wait, is that Happy Feet? Today's video has been sponsored by Ace Defender. Ace Defender is a free-to-play SRPG that combines turn-based RPG gameplay with tower defense-like elements. The game follows a traditional RPG storyline through 40 different chapters with a staggering total of near 2,000 levels. You go through these levels with a team of heroes you can customize to your own liking and playstyle. These heroes can be upgraded and combined to increase their power. If you're looking for some variety, there are other game modes apart from the campaign, namely King's Arena for PvP and Dungeons, Regions and Trials for PvE content. Now this game already has a good selection of 48 heroes, but there's now a brand new hero to collect known as Brenda the Demon Spear.
Mommy? Sorry.
Brenda is a big damage dealer but also a bit tanky due to being able to recover her own health. Alongside the new hero, there's also an upcoming feature called Realm of Deities. With this new feature, you'll be able to create your own castle, develop technologies, and train soldiers to conquer the map for endless treasure. By doing this, you'll also gain more power for your heroes. If this sounds like your cup of tea, download the game from the link in the description below, as you'll receive a powerful bonus being 10 Royal Recruit tickets after completing level 2-8. For those wondering, this won't take you that long to achieve. Next up was Ascension Creatures, which I of course decided to do on Capsarius in a personal owned Slayer dungeon. Now these are always quite nice to AFK because it doesn't require much, it doesn't have high input costs, and it's really AFK. The common loot isn't worth that much, but the main reason you're doing these is of course for the Ascension Keystones, which are always in demand because people use those to create Ascension crossbows by killing the Ascension bosses, which require those keystones. Now the amount of money you make from these is kind of luck dependent. Even though these are very consistent in terms of money you make, the type of key you get definitely matters. If you get a bunch of Primus keys in a row, you're going to be making much more money than if you were getting Quintus keys constantly or Quartus keys, which I believe are the cheapest. Now from this task I only received 1 keystone, but I also got a Sirenic Scale, and that's about 1 million GP in loot. It actually ended up being 980k, which doesn't sound like much, but the task only took me 8.2 minutes or so, so that's still over 7 million GP per hour. And considering that this is far easier to AFK than the dinosaurs, not requiring any fancy stuff, well, there you go. Next, I was unlucky to get a Gargoyles task. Now, usually I would have just skipped these because they're not a bad task, but if you have 120 Slayer, they're not very good at all, and you'll see that in the loot. The task almost took me 15 minutes. And while they're really easy to AFK, you just pop your soul split on and you just sit there with greater chain and stuff and, you know, Karoming, you smack them as a high level player. But the Gargoyles smack you back because they take up your time and they don't give you that much money in return. The spring cleaner alks most of the salvage, and that's where most of your money comes from when killing gargoyles, which is why they're not bad if you're a mid-level player. But 914k, which was the actual value of the loot you're seeing on screen after selling everything, is around 3.7 million GP per hour, which, yeah, that's not very good. Now, during the making of this video, I completely forgot that gargoyles are a creature you can catch using binding contracts, allowing you to net over 20 million GP per hour in just those binding contracts, making gargoyles a fantastic task. But in terms of base drops, they are incredibly bad. After that rather unpleasant gargoyles task, I got another Ascension Creatures task, which is not really a surprise as I do have them on my prefer list. And this time I was able to get a little bit more money, but it also took me 9 minutes. So I was able to sell this loot you're seeing on screen for around 1295k, making this task almost 1.5 million GP per hour better than the previous Ascension Creatures task, although I did of course receive more keystones, so that's no surprise there. Next up, I received a Muspa task, and this is another one of those very long tasks which you can actually AFK as well, although I decided to do it a little bit more actively so that I can get more of the loot off of the floor because I have them in my large room. Big mistake, because running around does not make this task any better, and it's one of those long tasks that is okay money, and if you were to AFK these at the World Gate or something, they're not terrible, they're okay. In total, I was able to sell this loot you can see on screen for 1953k, giving me around 7.3 million GP per hour. Now for the effort involved, at least in my personal Slayer dungeon, that was definitely not worth it at all. Next up, we have Abyssal Demons. Now if you do these with range using demon hunting gear and chins, and you could even potentially use a ranged training dummy as well, and Kurdel's favor ability to speed it up, you can get a ridiculous amount of kills per hour, and you can complete tasks anywhere from 4 to 6 minutes, which is incredibly fast. And Abyssal Demons are still a very relevant Slayer task to this day, even when going for 120. They're good charms, they're okay money, and their good experience. Now this loot ended up selling for 994k, and since the task took me 6 minutes, I was able to get near 10 million GP per hour to Abyssal Demons, and that is really good considering the age of this Slayer creature. But it is worth noting that if you aren't using the Death Note relic to note the ashes to easily pick them up, you are missing out on around 21 to 22% of your profit every single hour. This is excluding any Abyssal drops, by the way. Next up, we have Acheron Mammoths, and these used to be one of my favorite tasks when going for 120 Slayer, simply because they were a ridiculously good experience, and they still are to this day. If you're using a Ring of Vigor, Adrenaline Potions, and you're zerking on time, you can get over 700,000 Slayer experience base at these creatures, which is one of the best Slayer methods in the game. Now, while the drops aren't bad, I do believe that picking up the drops at Acheron Mammoths feels detrimental to your Slayer experience, and when I was going for 120, I barely even bothered to pick up anything apart from maybe the coins or a red drop here and there, or the Cursed Sand drop, which is actually worth quite some money. And even though I was able to net around 7 million GP per hour, this is one of those tasks where I would simply grab a Scrimshaw Sacrifice and focus on gaining that Slayer experience instead of getting that little bit of more money and, you know, wasting experience by picking up drops. This is really one of those tasks. Next up, we have Crystal Shapeshifters. Now, Crystal Shapeshifters are actually a really good Slayer task if you're going for 120, if you occasionally get it here and there, because it isn't that bad as long as you're using a Scrimshaw Vampirism, Crystal Armor with one piece of ranged gear on your legs, and keeping an eye on your health, because you can still get low even when AFKing these using a Bunyip, Vampirism or the right action bar against the stuns and all that good stuff. Now the GP per hour from Crystal Shapeshifters has definitely become lower because stuff like Potato Cactus just, well, it's worth way less than, let's say, a year or so ago, or maybe 2 years ago. They used to be, I think, like 4,000, maybe even more at some point, and now they're less than 1,000. So now the crystal armor pieces you can see on screen are obtained by swapping in the crystals at the right NPC, and they didn't seem to sell at all, so I ended up alking them, and it ended up being a little bit less, around 2.44 million GP. So that's about 7.8 million GP per hour, which, to be fair, is decent. Next up, we went back to Ascension Creatures. I'm not kidding, we got another task. And this task, it ended up raining drops. I didn't just get keystones, but I also managed to get Ascension Grips. At some point in the task, you know, RNG decided, hey, this guy wants some keystones, so we'll give him some. I think this has been my most lucky task so far, as I was able to net a total of 10.4 million GP in sale value, so actual value, out of this 9-minute task, giving us 69.54 million GP per hour. Now this happened in a similar video, and it does screw with the results, but it does show you that you can have good Slayer hours, and it doesn't just have to be boring 7 million GP per hour hours. You can have really good hours too if you manage to get some rare drops. Now the 10th and final task is actually quite interesting. Now while it doesn't have any real rare drops, sure you have the Kopesh, but it isn't worth that much. The keys to the crossing have obviously crashed pretty hard since the Arc Glacier. And the reason for that is because the T92 weapons, the Kopeshes, the upgraded ones that is, well, they don't have a special effect and they're almost useless at this point. I mean, you can get them as a tiny upgrade, but they're not worth it. And the T95s themselves are pretty bad too, but at least they're T95s. But yeah, the keys to the crossing right now are incredibly cheap. I managed to get 3 of them, and this was my loot in the chest. The loot ended up selling for around 3.1 mil, giving me around 11 million GP per hour from these corrupted workers, which is still a very respectable amount of money, especially if you consider that I was AFKing them, not tryharding, otherwise I would have made more money per hour as the task would have been far quicker. So despite the keys to the crossing crash, these are still very good money. And the same can be said for Soul Devours, even though I didn't get a task from them. If I take the total amount of time these tasks took me, not considering banking and changing presets, and the total amount of GP, on average I made 11.85 million GP per hour. Take about 1 to 1.5 million GP off of that in terms of supply and input costs, and you still have over 10 million GP per hour. Now you can increase that amount of money by a large amount, and you can skew with the average amount of money you make from Slayer per hour quite easily by simply skipping tasks that you don't like or are bad money. If you focus on getting the good tasks, for example, Moss Golems, Ripper Demons, Living Wyverns, Nightmare Creatures, Nihils, and Edimu, you could easily be making over 30 million GP per hour on average in the long run. That's how good those tasks are. So it really depends on your preferred block list and also on the amount of Slayer points you're ready to skip tasks. Now these matter even more so than before, as certain tasks seem to have decreased in profit per hour slightly. Now something like Ripper Demons can already make you, if you're using the right setup and you have all the boxes ticked, 36 million GP per hour in just the binding contracts. Let that sink in for a second. That's how good that task is. Moss Golems, if you're able to get something like Cinderbanes or an Ancient Elven Ritual Shard, are just insane money, but you do need to keep doing them until you get one of those drops on task. So to conclude, to make really good money from Slayer, it does seem like you need to do a good amount of tasks until you have your own personal setup ready and enough Slayer points to focus on getting those big money makers consistently. Let me know what your personal favorite Slayer tasks are in the comments down below, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.